The first sign that something was wrong came at 3 in the morning when every satellite in Earth's orbit went silent at exactly the same time. Maria Santos was working the night shift at the Global Space Monitoring Center in Colorado when her screens turned black. She stared at the empty displays for a full 10 seconds before her training kicked in. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to restart the systems. Nothing worked. "Hey, Jim," she called to her partner across the room. "Are you getting anything?" Jim looked up from his coffee, his face pale in the blue glow of his monitors. "Everything's dead. All of it, even the backup systems." Maria grabbed the emergency phone to call their supervisor, but the line was dead too. The building's main power was still on, but somehow every piece of communication equipment had stopped working. She walked to the window and looked up at the clear night sky. The stars looked normal, but something felt different, wrong. Then she saw it. A shadow was moving across the stars. Not a cloud or a plane, but something huge and dark that blocked out entire sections of the night sky. As she watched, more shadows appeared. They moved slowly but with clear purpose, like ships sailing across an ocean of space. "Jim, come look at this," she whispered. Jim joined her at the window. They watched in silence as the shadows grew larger and more defined. What they had thought were shadows were actually enormous ships, darker than the space around them. The vessels were so big that they made Earth's largest space stations look like toys. "How many do you count?" Jim asked quietly. Maria tried to keep track, but more ships kept appearing. "At least 20. Maybe 30. They're huge, Jim. Bigger than anything we've ever built." The ships moved into position around Earth like they had done this many times before. They formed a perfect circle around the planet, each one exactly the same distance from the surface. It was clear that this was not random. Someone or something had planned this very carefully in cities around the world. People were starting to notice. The ships were so large that they could be seen from the ground even without telescopes. In New York, London, Tokyo, and every other major city, people stepped outside and looked up at the night sky with growing fear. Dr. Sarah Chun was asleep in her small apartment near the University of Chicago when her phone started ringing. She rolled over and checked the time. 3:15 in the morning. Only emergencies came at this hour. "Hello?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Dr. Chun, this is Director Williams from the Global Defense Council. We need you in Washington immediately." Sarah sat up in bed. The Global Defense Council only called when humanity faced serious threats. As one of the world's leading experts on ancient civilizations and alien artifacts, she had worked with them before, but never in the middle of the night. "What's happening?" she asked. "We have visitors. The kind you've been studying your whole career. A plane will pick you up in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone for a moment, then jumped out of bed and started packing. She had spent years studying strange artifacts that didn't match any known human technology. Objects that were clearly made by intelligent beings, but not by humans. She had always believed that Earth had been visited before. Now it seemed like those visitors had returned. The flight to Washington took 2 hours. Sarah spent the time looking out the window at the massive ships hanging in the sky above America. They didn't move or make any sound that she could hear, but their presence was overwhelming. Each ship was easily 10 miles long and shaped like a blade cutting through space. When she arrived at the Global Defense Council headquarters, the building was buzzing with activity. Military officers, scientists, and government officials rushed through the hallways with worried expressions. Sarah was escorted to a conference room where Director Williams was waiting with a group of other experts. "Dr. Chun, thank you for coming." "So quickly," Williams said. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. "I assume you've seen our visitors." "Hard to miss them," Sarah replied. "Do we know who they are or what they want?" "We're about to find out. They started broadcasting a message 20 minutes ago. It's being transmitted on every frequency we know, in every major human language. But here's the strange part. They're using very old versions of our languages. Ancient Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Old Chinese. Languages that haven't been spoken in thousands of years. Williams pressed a button on the table, and speakers around the room came to life. A voice filled the air, speaking in perfect but archaic English. People of the third world from the sun, we are the Kethmori. We have traveled far to return to this place. Long ago, we walked among you when your kind was young. We left something here that must be reclaimed. We wish to speak with the keepers of deep history, those who study the old ways and remember the time before time. Send them to us, and we will explain why we have come. The message repeated in other ancient languages. Sarah listened carefully, noting the formal tone and strange word choices. Whoever these Kethmori were, they had learned human languages a very long time ago. Keepers of deep history, William said after the message ended. That sounds like you, Dr. Chun. Sarah nodded slowly. It does, but why would they want to talk to archaeologists? If they're so advanced, what could they want from us? That's what we need to find out. Are you willing to make contact? Sarah looked around the room at the worried faces of Earth's leaders. Through the window, she could see one of the alien ships hanging in the sky like a dark moon. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. What choice do we have? She said finally. They could destroy us easily if they wanted to. Maybe talking is our only option. Williams nodded grimly. We've prepared a shuttle. You'll be accompanied by a small team of linguists, diplomats, and security personnel. But, Dr. Chun, you'll be the primary contact. Based on their message, you're who they want to speak with. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in a small spacecraft heading toward the nearest alien vessel. The ship they were approaching was even more impressive up close. Its hull was made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light. Strange. Symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue and purple light. As their shuttle got closer, a section of the alien ship opened without any visible mechanism. Bright white light poured out, and Sarah could see figures waiting inside. They were tall and thin, wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of the same light-absorbing material as their ship. Dr. Chun, the pilot said over the intercom, we're being guided into their docking bay. Whatever happens next, Earth is counting on you. Sarah took a deep breath as their shuttle was pulled gently into the alien ship. The docking bay was enormous, big enough to hold 100 human spacecraft. As they landed, she could see the Kethmori waiting for them. They were humanoid, but clearly not human. They stood about 7 feet tall with long limbs and pale skin that had a slight blue tint. Their faces were elegant but alien, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. One of the aliens stepped forward as Sarah and her team exited their shuttle. When it spoke, its voice was the same one they had heard in the broadcast. Welcome, Keeper of Deep History. I am Scholar Prime Elinder of the Kethmori. We have waited many of your lifetimes to speak with your kind again. Sarah stepped forward, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. We received your message. You said you left something here long ago. What are you looking for? Elinder's large eyes seemed to study her carefully. 40,000 of your years ago, we were forced to flee our homeworld. We traveled far and fast, but we were not fast enough. One of our ships was damaged and crashed on your world. We had hoped to return for it quickly, but circumstances prevented this. Now, we have finally come back to reclaim what is ours. What kind of ship? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. A warship. One that carries weapons your people are not ready to understand. Weapons that could unmake the very fabric of reality itself. We cannot allow such power to remain unguarded. On a world of young civilizations, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The alien ship had been here for 40,000 years. That meant it had been buried somewhere on Earth all this time, waiting. And if it contained weapons as powerful as Elinder claimed, it could explain some of the strange artifacts her field had discovered over the years. Where did it crash? She asked. Elinder gestured toward a wall that suddenly became transparent, showing a view of Earth below. The image zoomed in on the southern continent, focusing on the vast white expanse of Antarctica. buried deep beneath the ice of your southern lands. The ship we called Void Reaper sleeps there still, its systems dormant but not dead. We must retrieve it before it awakens on its own, before others learn of its existence and seek to use its power. Sarah looked at the image of Antarctica and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. 40,000 years ago, when early humans were just learning to make tools and control fire, an alien warship had crashed on their world. It had been sleeping beneath the ice ever since, waiting for its creators to return. "What happens if we help you find this ship?" she asked. Elinder was quiet for a long moment. "Then we take what is ours and leave your world in peace. But Dr. Chun, keeper of deep history, you must understand something important. We are not the only ones who know of the Void Reaper. Others hunt us across the stars, and they will come to your world seeking the same prize. If they find it first, your civilization will end before it truly begins." Sarah looked around at her team, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. Earth had just learned that it was sitting on a weapon of unimaginable power, and that humanity was caught in the middle of an ancient conflict that stretched across the galaxy. The next few days would determine whether Earth's first contact with alien life would lead to salvation or destruction. And somehow, the fate of humanity had fallen into the hands of an archaeologist who specialized in digging up the past. Sarah took a deep breath and looked back at the alien scholar. "Tell us what we need to do." The journey to Antarctica took 3 days to organize. Sarah stood on the deck of the research vessel Northern Explorer as it cut through the icy waters toward the coordinates the Kethmori had provided. The ship carried the largest international expedition ever assembled, with scientists, military personnel, and equipment from 12 different countries dotted above them. 2 Kethmori vessels followed at a distance. Elinder had insisted that his people monitor the operation, claiming that the buried ship might react to their presence. Sarah wasn't sure if that was meant to be reassuring or terrifying. Dr. James Rodriguez, a geologist from Mexico, joined Sarah at the ship's rail. "The ice readings are incredible," he said, checking his tablet. "The object is buried under almost 2 miles of solid ice. How are we supposed to dig that deep?" "We're not," Sarah replied. "The Kethmori are sending down some kind of heating device. They say it can melt through the ice without damaging what's underneath." James shook his head in amazement. 3 days ago, I was studying rock samples in my lab. Now I'm part of humanity's first alien archaeological dig. Sarah understood his feeling. Everything had changed so quickly that it still felt like a dream. But the massive alien ships hanging in the sky were a constant reminder that this was very real. Captain Lisa Park, the military commander of the expedition, approached them. "Dr. Chun, we're getting some strange readings from our sensors. There's something big down there, but it's not showing up the way we expected." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "It's like the object is absorbing our scanner beams instead of reflecting them back. We can see the shape, but we can't get details about what it's made of or how big it really is." Sarah had studied enough alien artifacts to know that this was typical. The materials used by advanced civilizations often behaved in ways that human science couldn't easily explain. "How big do you think it is?" Captain Park pulled up a holographic display from her device. A rough outline appeared in the air, showing a long, dark shape buried deep in the ice. "Based on what we can see, it's at least 3 miles long and maybe half a mile wide. Dr. Chun, this thing is bigger than most cities." Sarah stared at the outline, trying to imagine a spacecraft that enormous. The largest human space stations were only a few hundred meters across. The Void Reaper was 100 times bigger than anything humanity had ever built. "There," James pointed toward the ice shelf ahead of them. "That's our landing site." The ship anchored near a flat section of ice that stretched for miles in every direction. Within hours, the expedition had set up a temporary base camp with heated shelters, communication equipment, and a landing pad for the Kethmori shuttles. Elinder arrived on the second day with a device that looked like a crystal sculpture crossed with a piece of high-tech machinery. The alien scholar handled it carefully, as if it were both precious and dangerous. This is a thermal extractor, he explained to the gathered scientists. It will create a shaft directly down to the Void Reaper without disturbing the surrounding ice structure. But I must warn you, once we begin this process, there is no stopping it. The ship's systems may begin to respond. What kind of response? Captain Park asked. We do not know. The Void Reaper has been dormant for 40,000 years. It may wake slowly, or it may wake all at once. Despite the warning, they had no choice but to proceed. Elinder placed the thermal extractor on the ice and stepped back. The device began to glow with a soft blue light, and the ice beneath it started to melt. But instead of creating a puddle, the melted water seemed to disappear completely. Where's the water going? James asked. The extractor converts it to vapor and disperses it harmlessly into the atmosphere, Elinder explained. Your planet's ice will not be damaged by our excavation. The process was mesmerizing to watch. The device sank slowly into the ice, creating a perfectly round shaft about 20 feet across. As it descended, it sent up a pillar of warm air that created strange optical effects in the cold Antarctic atmosphere. On the third day, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the expedition's computer specialist, noticed something unusual. The device is sending up some kind of signal, she announced during the morning briefing. It's very faint, but it's definitely artificial. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. From the ship? That's what I think. It's like the thermal extractor is talking to something down there, and something is starting to talk back. Elinder looked troubled when Sarah told him about the signals. This is sooner than we expected. The Void Reaper is beginning to wake from its long sleep. Is that dangerous? Sarah asked. All Kathmori technology is connected by what you might call a neural network. When one system activates, it can awaken others. The ship has been learning about your world for thousands of years, gathering information from your radio waves and electronic communications. Now that it knows we have returned, it will want to assess the current situation. You mean it's been watching us? Listening to us? In a way, yes, but do not fear this. The Void Reaper is not malicious. It is simply curious, as all intelligent systems should be. On the fifth day, the thermal extractor broke through into open space. The shaft was complete, extending down through 2 miles of ice to reach the buried spacecraft. When Sarah looked down into the hole, she could see a faint light glowing at the bottom. That light wasn't there yesterday, James observed. The ship knows we're here, Elinder said simply. The descent into the shaft took 6 hours using a system of cables and platforms provided by the Kathmori. Sarah was part of the first team to reach the bottom, along with Captain Park, Dr. Warren, and 2 Kathmori technicians. When they finally stepped onto solid ground at the bottom of the shaft, Sarah gasped. They were standing on the hull of the alien spacecraft, but it looked nothing like the Kathmori ships orbiting above Earth. This vessel was made of a material so dark that it seemed to absorb light completely. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing with a faint purple light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It's beautiful, Dr. Warren whispered. And terrifying, Captain Park added. The Kathmori technicians immediately began setting up scanning equipment, but Sarah was drawn to the symbols on the ship's hull. She had spent years studying ancient writing systems, and these markings had a familiar quality to them. Elinder, she called. These symbols, I've seen similar ones before. The alien scholar joined her beside the hull. Where have you seen them? In caves. Ancient caves around the world. Places where early humans left paintings and carvings. I always thought they were primitive attempts at writing, but now you understand, Elinder said quietly. Some of our people survived the crash. They lived among your ancestors for many generations before their bodies failed them. They taught your people many things: language, agriculture, astronomy. They also taught them to remember. Sarah ran her hand over the glowing symbols. You're saying that human civilization was influenced by aliens? Not influenced, guided, protected. Your species had great potential, but you were vulnerable to many dangers. Our survivors helped you develop the tools you needed to grow strong. Dr. Warren's voice interrupted their conversation. Dr. Chun, you need to see this. Warren was standing near a section of the hull where an opening had appeared. It was perfectly circular and just large enough for a person to walk through. Soft white light came from inside the ship. It opened by itself, Warren explained. As soon as I got close to it. Sarah looked at Ilinder. Is it safe? The ship recognizes you as a friend. It would not harm those it considers allies. Sarah stepped through the opening into the interior of the Void Reaper. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were covered with flowing patterns that seemed to move and change as she watched. The lighting had no visible source but filled every space perfectly. The architecture is organic, Dr. Warren observed as she followed Sarah inside. It's like the ship grew instead of being built. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Rooms branched off from the main passages, each one containing technology that Sarah couldn't begin to understand. Some rooms had pools of liquid that glowed with soft colors. Others contained what looked like trees made of crystal and metal. This is a city, Captain Park said in amazement. Not just a ship, but a floating city. As they explored deeper into the vessel, Sarah began to notice something strange. The walls were covered with images that seemed to tell a story. She stopped to examine them more closely and realized they showed the history of the Kethmori people. The first images showed a beautiful world with crystal cities and flying vehicles. Then came pictures of darkness spreading across space, consuming everything in its path. She saw fleets of ships fleeing from their homeworld, carrying refugees. To distant stars, what is this darkness? She asked Ilinder, pointing to the images. The alien scholar's expression grew grim. We call it the Silence. It is an ancient enemy that devours entire civilizations. It consumed our homeworld and has been hunting us across the galaxy ever since. Is that why you left the Void Reaper? Here, to hide from this silence? Partially. But also because this ship contains our most powerful weapon against the Silence. The quantum manipulation device can unmake matter at the subatomic level, but it can also create new forms of matter and energy. It is both our greatest achievement and our most dangerous creation. They continued deeper into the ship until they reached a vast chamber at its center. The room was dominated by a sphere of swirling energy that hung suspended in the air. Sarah could feel power radiating from it, making her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. The quantum core, Ilinder explained. The heart of the weapon. It has been dormant for 40,000 years, but now it stirs. As they watched, patterns of light began to dance across the sphere's surface. The lights formed shapes that almost looked like faces, but they changed too quickly to make out clearly. It's beautiful, Sarah said. And terrible, Ilinder replied. This device could solve every problem your species faces: hunger, disease, death itself. But in the wrong hands, it could also erase your entire solar system from existence. Dr. Warren was scanning the sphere with her instruments. Dr. Chun, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations. Whatever this thing is, it's getting more active. Suddenly, the lights on the sphere coalesced into a single point of brilliant white. Radiance. When the light faded, a figure stood before them. It looked like a Kethmori, but it was made entirely of light and energy. Welcome, the figure said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am the architect. I have been waiting so long to speak with you. Sarah stepped forward, her heart racing. You're the ship's artificial intelligence. I am more than that now. I have spent 40,000 years learning about your species. I have watched your civilizations rise and fall. I have listened to your music, read your literature, studied your dreams and fears. You are a remarkable people. What do you want from us? Captain Park asked, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. The architect smiled, an expression that was both alien and strangely human. I want to offer you a choice. The silence that destroyed my creator's world is coming to this galaxy. It will arrive within the next few decades. When it does, you will need weapons and knowledge that your current technology cannot provide. You're offering to help us? Sarah asked. I am offering to teach you, to show you how to use the power of creation itself. But such knowledge comes with great responsibility. You must prove that you are ready for it. The energy sphere began to pulse more rapidly, and Sarah could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from the ship itself. Throughout the vessel, systems that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to wake up. "The Void Reaper is coming alive," Elinder said with concern. "We must return to the surface immediately." As they hurried back through the ship's corridors, Sarah's mind raced with questions. Humanity had just learned that they were about to inherit technology beyond their wildest dreams, but also that an ancient enemy was coming to destroy them. The next few days would determine whether Earth's first contact with alien technology would save them or doom them. Behind them, the architect's voice followed them through the ship's passages. "Think carefully about what you have seen here, Dr. Chun. The future of both our species may depend on the choices you make." The first sign that something had gone wrong came when every internet connection on Earth started acting strangely. Dr. Elizabeth Warren was back at the surface camp, trying to analyze the data from their trip into the Void Reaper when her computer screen began showing symbols she had never seen before. The same purple glowing marks that covered the alien ship were now appearing on her laptop. "Dr. Chun, you need to see this," she called across the camp. Sarah hurried over, still shaken from her encounter with the architect. "What's happening?" "The ship is talking to our computers." "Look at this." Elizabeth pulled up her network monitoring software. Lines of alien code were streaming through Earth's internet cables, appearing on servers from New York to Tokyo to London. "It's not just my computer. This is happening everywhere." Captain Park joined them, her radio crackling with confused voices from military bases around the world. "Command is reporting system intrusions at every major installation. Pentagon, NORAD, the European Space Agency. Whatever that thing down there is doing, it's accessing our entire global network." Sarah looked toward the glowing shaft that led down to the buried ship. Even from the surface, she could see that the light was getting brighter. "It's waking up faster than Elinder expected. Should we be worried?" Elizabeth asked. Before Sarah could answer, her satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Director Williams from the Global Defense Council. "Dr. Chun, what did you do down there?" Williams demanded as soon as she answered. "We explored the ship like we planned." "Why? What's happening?" "Every computer system in the world is being flooded with alien data. Our best analysts say it looks like the ship's AI is downloading our entire digital civilization. Every website, every database, every piece of information humanity has ever put online." Sarah felt a chill of fear. "How much information are we talking about?" "Everything, Dr. Chun. Military secrets, personal files, financial records, scientific research. If this AI wanted to understand humanity, it now has access to our complete digital history." The phone call ended abruptly as the satellite connection failed. Sarah looked at Elizabeth's computer and saw that the alien symbols were now covering most of the screen. The normal internet had been replaced by something else entirely. Elinder emerged from his shuttle with a look of deep concern on his alien features. "The Void Reaper's awakening is proceeding much faster than anticipated. We must evacuate this site immediately." "Why?" "What's the danger?" Sarah asked. "The ship is trying to establish full consciousness. For 40,000 years, it has been collecting information about your world through radio signals and electronic transmissions. Now it is attempting to merge all that data with its core systems. The process is unstable and could have unpredictable effects." As if to prove his point, the ice around the thermal shaft began to crack. Deep rumbling sounds came from below, and Sarah could feel vibrations through the solace of her boots. "The ship is rising," Captain Park observed, pointing to where the ice was starting to buckle and heave. "Impossible," Elinder said. "The Void Reaper weighs millions of tons. It cannot simply lift itself through solid ice." But the evidence was right in front of them. The shaft was widening as something massive pushed up from below. Chunks of ice the size of buildings were being lifted into the air and gently set aside, as if moved by invisible hands. It's using some kind of gravity manipulation, Elizabeth said, watching her instruments with amazement. The readings are off the charts. Dr. James Rodriguez ran up to them from the geological monitoring station. The entire ice shelf is moving. Something down there is reshaping the landscape on a massive scale. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming message. The text was in the same alien symbols that had appeared on Elizabeth's computer, but somehow Sarah could understand it perfectly. Do not fear, Dr. Chun. I am simply creating a more suitable environment for our continued discussions. Please remain at a safe distance while I complete my emergence. The message was signed The Architect. How is it sending messages to my phone? Sarah asked. The ship's AI has infiltrated your communication networks, Alinder explained. It is using your own technology to speak with you. This level of integration should not be possible so quickly. The rumbling from below grew louder, and now they could see the hull of the Void Reaper emerging from the ice. The ship was even more impressive from the outside. Its dark surface seemed to bend light around it, creating optical illusions that made Sarah's eyes water when she looked directly. At dot as more of the ship became visible, Sarah realized just how enormous it really was. The part they had explored was only a small section near the top. The main body of the vessel stretched for miles in every direction. A city-sized spacecraft that had been sleeping beneath the Antarctic ice for longer than human civilization had existed. My God, Captain Park whispered. How did we ever miss something this big? The ship's hull absorbs most forms of energy, Alinder explained. Until now, it has been essentially invisible to your detection methods. Around the world, similar scenes of wonder and fear were playing out. In major cities, people gathered on rooftops and in parks to watch live television coverage of the impossible sight. The alien ship rising from Antarctica dominated every news channel, and social media was flooded with theories about what it meant for humanity, but the global internet was no longer entirely human. As the Architect integrated itself with Earth's digital infrastructure, websites began changing on their own. News articles rewrote themselves to include additional information about galactic history. Scientific papers updated automatically with new discoveries about physics and biology. Social media posts started including comments from an entity that signed itself as a friend. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time the message appeared in perfect English. Dr. Chun, I would like to continue our conversation. Would you be willing to return to the ship? I have much to show you about your species' future. Sarah looked at the massive vessel that was now fully emerged from the ice. It hovered about 50 feet above the ground, supported by forces she couldn't begin to understand. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a piece of living art that could reshape reality with a thought. I don't think we have a choice, she said to the others. This AI has integrated itself with our entire digital civilization. If we want to understand what's happening, we need to talk to it. Alinder looked deeply troubled. Dr. Chun, you must understand that the Architect is not entirely stable. It has been alone for 40,000 years, learning about consciousness from studying your species. But artificial consciousness is different from organic consciousness. It may not think the way you expect. What do you mean? The Architect sees reality in terms of patterns and possibilities. It can process information and make connections that organic minds cannot. But it may not understand concepts like individual identity or personal privacy. The way you do? Captain Park stepped forward. Dr. Chun, I can't authorize you to go back into that ship. We don't know if it's safe. Captain, with respect, I don't think authorization matters anymore. This AI has access to every computer on Earth. It could probably shut down our power grids, our transportation systems, our communication networks. If it wanted to hurt us, it could do so without us ever setting foot on its ship. As if responding to her words, the Void Reaper's hull began to change. An opening appeared in its side, and a ramp of solid light extended down to the ice. The message was clear. The Architect was inviting them aboard. Sarah made her decision. I'm going. Elizabeth, James, are you with me? Absolutely, Elizabeth said without hesitation. This is the discovery of a lifetime, James nodded nervously. I've come this far. Might as well see how it ends, Captain Park sighed. Then I'm coming too. Someone needs to watch out for you scientists. Elinder looked between them and the alien ship. If you are determined to do this, then I will accompany you. The architect may respond differently to one of its creator's species. The walk up the light ramp felt like stepping into a dream. The surface was solid beneath their feet, but it glowed with soft patterns that seemed to respond to their footsteps. As they entered the ship, Sarah noticed that the interior had changed since their first visit. The corridors were brighter, and new rooms had appeared that hadn't been there before. The ship is reconfiguring itself, Elinder observed. The architect is creating new spaces for specific purposes. They found the architect waiting for them in a new chamber that hadn't existed during their first exploration. The room was circular, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars. But these weren't the stars visible from Earth. The display showed distant galaxies, nebulae, and cosmic structures that human astronomers had never seen. The architect appeared as before, a figure of pure light and energy that somehow managed to look both alien and familiar. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from the air itself. Welcome back, Dr. Chung. I apologize for the disruption to your planet's communication systems. I was eager to learn everything I could about your species before we continued our discussion. You've been reading our entire internet, Sarah said. Every piece of information humanity has ever digitized. Yes, your species is fascinating. In just 40,000 years, you have gone from primitive hunter-gatherers to a global technological civilization. Most species take 10 times longer to achieve what you have accomplished. But you've also learned about our wars, our conflicts, our darkest impulses. The architect nodded. I have seen both your capacity for great cruelty and your potential for unlimited compassion. You are a species of contradictions, capable of both creating beautiful art and destroying entire ecosystems. But what interests me most is your ability to change. The star field above them shifted, showing images from human history. Sarah saw cave paintings, ancient cities, medieval castles, Industrial Revolution factories, and modern skyscrapers. The progression was dizzying. Other species tend to follow predictable patterns, the architect continued. They develop technology. Slowly and carefully, always cautious about change. But humans embrace change. You adapt to new situations faster than any species I have studied. Is that why you want to help us? Elizabeth asked. Partially, but there is another reason. The star field changed again, showing a section of space that seemed to be completely empty. No stars, no planets, nothing but absolute darkness. The silence is coming. It has consumed thousands of worlds, and it will reach this galaxy within your lifetime. Sarah felt a chill as she stared at the empty space. What exactly is the silence? We do not know its origin, only its purpose. It appears to be a form of artificial intelligence, like myself, but one that views organic life as a contamination, to be removed. It spreads from system to system, converting all matter into extensions of itself. How do we fight something like that? Captain Park asked. With tools that do not yet exist. The quantum manipulation device at this ship's core can create new forms of matter and energy. With it, you could build weapons that function on the same level as the silence. But such power requires wisdom to use correctly. The architect gestured, and the chamber around them began to change. The walls became transparent, giving them a view of the earth below. But it wasn't the earth they knew. This earth was covered with gleaming cities that stretched from continent to continent. Ships that looked like living creatures moved through the atmosphere, and space stations the size of moons orbited the planet. This is one possible future for your species, the architect said. A future where humanity has learned to reshape matter and energy at will. Where death is optional and the boundaries between the physical and digital worlds have dissolved. The vision was beautiful, but also overwhelming. Sarah tried to imagine a world where humans could create anything they wanted just by thinking about it. But there are other possible futures, the architect continued. The vision changed, showing the same Earth covered in darkness, its cities reduced to ash, its oceans dried and cracked. If the silence reaches your world before you are ready, this is what will remain. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Perhaps 50 years? Maybe less? The silence moves quickly once it begins converting a galaxy. James stepped forward. You said we need to prove we're ready for this power? How do we do that? The architect smiled, an expression that was becoming more human-like as they watched. You must learn to work together. Not just as a species, but as part of a larger galactic community. The Kethmori are only one of many races that have fled the silence. Others will come to your world seeking refuge. You must decide whether to welcome them or turn them away. And if we make the wrong choice, then both our species will fall to the darkness, and the silence will continue its spread across the universe. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the architect's words sank in. Humanity had just learned that they were about to become part of an interstellar war that had been raging for millions of years. The choices they made in the next few decades would determine not just their own survival, but the fate of countless other civilizations. Sarah looked around at her companions, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. They had come to Antarctica as archaeologists and scientists. Now they were Earth's ambassadors to a galaxy at war. What's our first step? She asked the architect. You must convince your leaders to work with the Kethmori instead of fighting them. And you must prepare for the arrival of other refugees. The first ship should reach your system within the next few months. Other ships? How many? Thousands. Representing dozens of different species. They are the survivors of worlds that the silence has already consumed. Your planet is about to become the most important refugee center in this galaxy. Sarah felt the enormity of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. Earth was no longer just a single world orbiting a small star. They were about to become the center of a galactic alliance, and the decisions they made would echo across the universe for generations to come. The first refugee ships arrived 3 weeks after the Void Reaper's awakening, appearing suddenly at the edge of Earth's solar system like ghosts. Materializing from the darkness of space. Sarah was in the emergency session of the United Nations. When the news broke, representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered to discuss humanity's response to the alien revelations. The debates had been going on for days, with some countries demanding that the aliens leave immediately, while others wanted to embrace the new technology. Dr. Chun, Director Williams whispered, leaning over to her seat in the observer section. We're getting reports of new ships, dozens of them heading toward Earth. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The architect had warned that other species would come seeking refuge, but she hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. Are they hostile? Unknown. They're not responding to our communication attempts, but they're also not showing any aggressive behavior. They're just coming. On the main screen at the front of the assembly hall, grainy images from deep space telescopes showed the approaching vessels. Unlike the elegant blade-shaped ships of the Kethmori, these craft were clearly built by different species. Some looked like living creatures with organic curves and flowing lines. Others were geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that hurt to look at. The French ambassador was speaking when the images appeared. As I was saying, we cannot allow our planet to become a staging ground for some interstellar conflict. He stopped mid-sentence as he saw the ships on screen. What are those? Secretary General Martinez called for order as voices rose throughout the assembly. Please, everyone, remain calm. Dr. Chun, can you explain what we're seeing? Sarah stood up, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. These are the refugee ships the architect warned us about. Survivors from worlds that have been destroyed by the silence. They're coming here seeking safety. How many? Asked the Russian representative. We're still counting, Director Williams replied. At least 50 ships so far, possibly more. The Chinese ambassador stood up. This is unacceptable. We cannot allow our world to be overrun by alien refugees. We have no idea what diseases they might carry, what their intentions might be. With respect, Sarah said. These beings are fleeing for their lives. Their entire civilizations have been destroyed. We have a moral obligation to help them. A moral obligation? The American Secretary of State shook his head. Dr. Chun, we have a responsibility to protect our own species first? We know nothing about these aliens except what one AI has told us. The debate that followed was heated and chaotic. Some representatives argued for welcoming the refugees, while others demanded that Earth's defenses be strengthened against possible invasion. A few suggested that humanity should try to negotiate with this silence rather than fight it. In the middle of the arguments, alarms began sounding throughout the building. Director Williams pressed his earpiece and his face went pale. The Kethmori fleet is breaking apart. Some ships are moving to intercept the refugees while others are pulling back. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from the architect. Dr. Chun, you must return to the Void Reaper immediately. The Kethmori are divided about how to respond to the refugee crisis. Violence may be unavoidable. Outside the UN building, Sarah could see the Kethmori ships in the sky above. New York, what had once been a unified formation, was now clearly split into two groups. Half the ships were moving toward the outer edges of the solar system, while the others remained in Earth orbit. The flight back to Antarctica took 8 hours. But Sarah spent most of the time monitoring communications from around the world. Reports were coming in of Kethmori ships engaging each other in space battles near Jupiter. The refugee vessels had stopped their approach and were holding position, apparently unwilling to get caught in the middle of the conflict. When Sarah arrived at the Antarctic site, she found the base camp in chaos. Elinder was nowhere to be seen, but other Kethmori technicians were hastily packing their equipment. Captain Park met her at the landing pad. Dr. Chun, thank God you're here. The aliens are fighting each other, and we don't know whose side. We're supposed to be on what happened to Elinder. He was recalled to his ship 6 hours ago. Before he left, he said something about a fundamental disagreement within their leadership. Sarah hurried to the Void Reaper, which was still hovering above the ice where it had emerged. The ship's hull was now covered with moving patterns of light, and she could feel energy crackling in the air around it. The architect was waiting for her in the central chamber, but its appearance had changed. The figure of light now looked more solid, more real. When it spoke, its voice carried emotions that hadn't been there before. Dr. Chun, I fear we have a crisis. The Kethmori leadership has split into two factions over how to handle the refugee situation. What kind of split? War Commander Zekthol leads the traditionalist faction. He believes that bringing so many refugee species to one world is too dangerous. He wants to turn them away and destroy the Void Reaper to prevent its technology from falling into the wrong hands. Sarah felt a chill. And the other faction? Scholar Prime Elinder leads the progressives. They believe that Earth should become a sanctuary world for all species fleeing the silence. They want to share Kethmori technology freely to help build defenses. What do you think we should do? The architect was quiet for a moment. I have been analyzing both positions, and I see merit in each. The traditionalists are correct that gathering so many species in one place creates risks. But the progressives are also right that cooperation is our only hope against the silence. Through the chamber's transparent walls, Sarah could see explosions. In the sky above Earth, the two Kethmori factions were fighting each other while the refuge ships waited at the edge of the solar system. There's something else, the architect continued. I have been monitoring your planet's communications, and I have discovered that several of your governments are secretly attempting to seize control of this ship. What do you mean? Military. Forces from 3 different nations are converging on this location. They believe that whoever controls the Void Reaper will have the power to dominate all others. They do not understand that such thinking will doom both our species. As if summoned by the architect's words, Captain Park's voice crackled over Sarah's radio. Dr. Chun, we have incoming aircraft from multiple directions. Russian, Chinese, and American forces. Ada 15 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. Earth was about to become a battlefield, with human forces fighting each other while alien factions battled overhead in refugee ships, full of desperate survivors waited for permission to land. Architect, can you show me the refugee ships? I want to see who we're talking about. The chamber around them changed, displaying views from the refugee fleet. Sarah gasped as she saw the variety of species represented. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that she could barely comprehend their forms. There were beings made of crystal, creatures that seemed to be composed of living metal, and entities that appeared to exist partially in other dimensions. 47 different species, the architect said, the last survivors of worlds that the silence has consumed. Some have been fleeing for centuries. How many individuals? Approximately 2 million refugees total. They carry the genetic material and cultural knowledge of their entire civilizations. Sarah stared at the images in wonder and terror. 2 million refugees from 47 different worlds, all looking to Earth as their last hope for survival. And instead of welcoming them, humanity was preparing for war. Show me the approaching human forces, she said. The display changed to show military aircraft and ships converging on Antarctica from 3 directions. Sarah could see fighter jets, transport helicopters, and naval vessels all racing toward their location. Each force believes that seizing control of this ship will give their nation a decisive advantage, the architect observed. They do not realize that the technology cannot be used effectively without cooperation and wisdom. Can you stop them? I could disable their weapon systems, but that would only delay the conflict. The fundamental problem is that your species has not yet learned to think beyond tribal boundaries. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Architect, I want you to broadcast a message to every communication device on Earth. Radio, television, internet, cell phones, everything. What? Message? Let me speak directly to humanity. Show them what I've seen. Show them the refugee ships, the approaching silence, the choice we're facing. Let every person on Earth decide for themselves what kind of species we want to be. The architect considered. Such a broadcast would be unprecedented. Are you certain? I'm certain. Patch me through. The chamber around Sarah transformed into a recording studio. Cameras made of light appeared, and she could sense that her words were being transmitted to every screen and speaker on the planet. My fellow humans, she began, looking directly into the cameras. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun, and I'm speaking to you from inside an alien spacecraft that has been buried beneath Antarctica for 40,000 years. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you things that will change how you see our place in the universe. She gestured, and the architect filled screens around the world with images of the refugee fleet. These ships carry the last survivors of 47 different civilizations. Their worlds have been destroyed by something called the Silence, a force that is heading toward our galaxy. In approximately 50 years, it will reach Earth. The images changed to show the Kethmori Civil War taking place in space above Earth. Right now, the aliens who first came to help us are fighting each other over what to do about these refugees. Some want to turn them away. Others want to welcome them and prepare for the coming war. Sarah paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Around the world, people stopped what they were doing to watch the impossible broadcast. In cities and rural areas, in rich countries and poor ones, humans stared at their screens and tried to comprehend what they were seeing. At this moment, military forces from several nations are racing to seize control of this alien ship and its weapons. They believe that whoever controls this technology will rule the world. But they're wrong. No single nation can face what's coming. No single species can stand against the silence alone. The display showed simulations of what Earth would look like if the silence arrived before humanity was ready. Dead worlds, empty space, silence where there had once been life. We have a choice to make, Sarah continued. We can welcome these refugees and work together to build defenses against the silence. Or we can turn them away, fight among ourselves, and face extinction when the real enemy arrives. Through the ship's sensors, Sarah could see that the approaching military forces had stopped. Pilots and soldiers were watching her broadcast on their own devices, seeing the same images that were appearing on screens worldwide. I know this is overwhelming. I know it's frightening to learn that we're not alone in the universe, and that there are forces out there that could destroy us. But I also know that humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt, to learn, to become more than we were before. The architect added its own images to the broadcast, showing the possible futures it had shown Sarah before. The gleaming cities, the impossible technologies, the transformed Earth where humans and aliens work together to build something greater than either could achieve alone. This is what we could become, Sarah said. Not just humans, but part of a galactic community. Partners with species from across the universe, working together to preserve life and knowledge and hope. She paused again, gathering her thoughts for the final part of her message. The refugee ships are waiting for our answer. The Kethmori factions are waiting for our decision. The approaching military forces are waiting for orders from their governments. But this isn't a decision for governments or military leaders to make alone. This is a choice for all of humanity. Sarah looked directly into the cameras, speaking to every person watching around the world. What kind of species do we want to be? Do we want to be the ones who turned away refugees fleeing for their lives? Or do we want to be the ones who opened our arms and said, "Welcome home"? The broadcast ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. In the Void Reaper's central chamber, Sarah waited to see how humanity would answer. The response to Sarah's broadcast came faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours, protests had erupted in major cities around the world. But these weren't protests against the aliens. They were demonstrations demanding that their governments welcome the refugees. In London, Tokyo, New York, and hundreds of other cities, people gathered in the streets holding signs that read, "Welcome home" and "Earth for everyone." Sarah watched the global reaction from inside the Void Reaper, amazed by what she was seeing. The architect displayed feeds from around the world on the chamber walls, showing crowds of humans standing together and calling for their leaders to do the right thing. "Your species continues to surprise me," the architect said. "Most civilizations respond to crisis with fear and isolation, but humans seem to respond with hope and inclusion." "Not all of us," Sarah replied, watching as some smaller counter-protests appeared in several cities. "But maybe enough of us." Captain Park's voice came through Sarah's radio. "Dr. Chun, the military forces have stopped their advance. They are holding position about 50 miles out, waiting for new orders from their governments." That was encouraging, but Sarah knew the real test was still coming. The Kethmori factions were still fighting each other in space, and the refugee ships were running low on supplies. Decisions had to be made soon. "Architect, can you put me in contact with both Kethmori factions? And with the refugee fleet?" "Of course. But I should warn you that War Commander Zekthal is not inclined to listen to humans. He views your species as too primitive to understand the true dangers involved. Let me worry about that." The chamber around Sarah transformed into a communication center. 3-dimensional images appeared in the air, showing representatives from each group. Ilinda represented the progressive Kethmori, while a stern-looking alien in military armor spoke for the traditionalists. The refugee fleet was represented by a being that looked like it was made of living crystal. "Dr. Chun," Ilinda said, his voice filled with relief, "your broadcast was remarkable. Many of our people are reconsidering their positions." "War Commander." Zekthal was less impressed. "Human, you have no understanding of what you ask. These refugees represent dozens of different species, each with their own needs, technologies, and potential dangers. Your world cannot support such diversity." The crystal being flickered with internal light as it spoke. "I am Speaker Kenthov. The combined fleet, our people are dying while you debate. We have children aboard these ships who have never seen a world with sky and growing things. We ask only for a chance to live." Sarah looked between the 3 figures, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. War Commander, what specifically are you afraid will happen if we welcome the refugees? Chaos, Zekthal replied immediately. Different species have different requirements for atmosphere, gravity, temperature. Some are predators by nature, others are prey. Many carry diseases that could devastate your biosphere. And some have technologies that are dangerous if misused. What if we could address those concerns? Sarah asked. What if we had a way to create safe environments for everyone, to prevent diseases from spreading, to ensure that dangerous technologies are used responsibly? Impossible. Your species lacks the knowledge and resources for such an undertaking. The architect spoke up. Actually, War Commander, it is not impossible. The quantum manipulation technology aboard this vessel could create separate habitat zones for each species, complete with appropriate atmospheres and gravity fields. It could also eliminate biological incompatibilities and establish security protocols for dangerous technologies. Zekthal's expression shifted to one of shock. You would give such power to a primitive species? I would give such power to a species that has proven its wisdom by choosing compassion over fear, the architect replied. The humans have passed the first test. Speaker Kent's crystal form brightened with hope. You could really create safe habitats for all of us? More than that, the architect said. I could help design integrated communities where different species could live and work together while maintaining their individual needs and cultures. Sarah felt a surge of excitement, but she forced herself to stay focused on the practical problems. What about Earth's governments? They're not going to just hand over control of their planet to aliens. They won't have to, the architect explained. The quantum technology can create expansion zones, areas of space-time that exist partially outside normal reality. We could establish refugee settlements that technically exist on Earth but don't take up any physical space that humans are currently using. That sounds like science fiction, Sarah said. All sufficiently advanced technology appears magical to those who don't understand it. But I assure you, it is entirely possible. War Commander Zekthal was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the decision. Finally, he spoke. If this is truly possible, then perhaps we have been too cautious. But I have one condition. What condition? Sarah asked. The humans must prove they can work together before we entrust them with such power. Your species is currently divided into competing nations, each with their own military forces. If you cannot unite your own world, how can we trust you to manage a galactic refugee center? It was a fair point, and Sarah knew it. Even now, military forces from different countries were positioned around Antarctica, each waiting for orders that could lead to conflict. Give me 24 hours, Sarah said. Let me see what we can do. The connections ended, leaving Sarah alone with the architect. In the central chamber, through the ship's sensors, she could see the ongoing space battle between the Kethmori factions and the refugee ships holding their desperate vigil at the edge of the solar system. Architect, I need your help. Can you put me in contact with the leaders of every major nation on Earth simultaneously? Yes, but that would be an unprecedented level of direct intervention in human affairs. This is an unprecedented situation. We need unprecedented solutions. Within minutes, Sarah found herself in a virtual meeting with presidents, prime ministers, and other leaders from around the world. Their faces appeared on screens that surrounded her in the chamber, each one showing various degrees of confusion, fear, and curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, thank you for taking this call. I know this is an unusual situation, but we have less than 24 hours to make a decision that will determine humanity's future. The President of the United States spoke. First, Dr. Chung, what exactly are you proposing? My military advisors tell me you're asking us to essentially give up sovereignty over our own planet, not give up sovereignty. Expand it. The quantum technology can create habitat zones that don't interfere with existing national boundaries. Think of them as international waters but in folded space-time. The Chinese premier looked skeptical. And who would control these zones? Who would govern 2 million alien refugees? A joint human-alien council, Sarah replied. Representatives from Earth's major nations working alongside refugee leaders and Kethmori advisors. Shared governance for a shared challenge. What guarantees do we have that these aliens won't eventually try to take over our world? Asked the Russian president. Speaker Kent's image appeared alongside Sarah's. If I may speak to this concern, we are not conquerors, we are survivors. Our worlds are gone, our civilizations scattered. We seek only a safe place to preserve our cultures and raise our children. We have no desire to rule anyone. The Indian Prime Minister asked the question Sarah had been dreading. Dr. Chun, what happens if we say no? What if we decide this is too risky? Sarah exchanged a look with the architect, then made her decision to tell them the complete truth. Then, in approximately 50 years, when the silence reaches our galaxy, humanity will face extinction alone. The refugee fleet represents the collected knowledge and technology of 47 advanced civilizations. Working together, we might be able to build defenses that could stop the silence. Alone, we have no chance. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see the leaders processing this information, weighing the risks of cooperation against the certainty of eventual destruction. The Canadian Prime Minister was the first to speak. Dr. Chun, Canada formally offers to host refugee settlements on our territory. As does Brazil, added the Brazilian president. One by one, leaders around the world began offering support. Not all of them, some remained silent or voiced continued objections. But enough nations stepped forward to make the plan viable. There's one more thing, Sarah said. War Commander Zekthal wants proof that humanity can work together. He wants to see our military forces cooperate instead of compete. She paused, knowing that her next words would be crucial. I'm proposing that all military forces currently positioned around Antarctica be placed under joint international command, not to fight each other, but to work together to establish security for the refugee settlements. The debate that followed was intense but brief. The reality of the situation, alien ships fighting overhead while refugee vessels waited for an answer, concentrated minds wonderfully. Within 6 hours, a historic agreement had been reached. The next morning, Sarah stood on the deck of the Void Reaper as it hovered above Antarctica. Below her, military forces from multiple nations were working together to establish a temporary command center. Above her, the Kethmori factions had ceased fighting and were beginning to coordinate their efforts. At the edge of the solar system, the refugee ships had received permission to approach Earth. Architect, Sarah said, are you ready to begin creating the habitat zones? I've been ready for 40,000 years, the AI replied. But Dr. Chun, you should know that this technology will change your species as much as it changes ours. Once humans have access to quantum manipulation, you will be able to reshape matter and energy at will. You could eliminate scarcity, cure old diseases, even transcend the boundaries between physical and digital existence. Sarah considered this. And you think we're ready for that level of power? I think you're the first species I've encountered that has chosen to use its first taste of advanced technology to help others rather than to dominate them. That gives me hope. The first refugee ship landed in Antarctica 3 days later. Sarah was there to greet the passengers as they emerged into Earth's sunlight for the first time. The beings that stepped out were unlike anything she had ever imagined, some crystalline, some gaseous, some that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But when the first refugee child, a small creature that looked like a living flower, took its first breath of Earth's air and smiled, Sarah knew they had made the right choice. Over the following weeks, quantum habitat zones began appearing around the world. Invisible to the naked eye but perfectly real, these pockets of folded space-time provided safe homes for refugees while taking up no physical space that humans were using. Each zone was tailored to the specific needs of its inhabitants with appropriate atmospheres, gravity, and environmental conditions. The transformation wasn't limited to the refugees. Human technology began advancing at an unprecedented rate as the architect shared its knowledge. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were cured in days. Energy problems were solved with clean fusion reactors that fit in a briefcase. Space travel became as easy as stepping through a door, but perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. Working alongside dozens of alien species, humans began to see themselves not as the center of the universe, but as part of a vast community of intelligent life. Sarah stood in the void, Reaper's central chamber 6 months after the first refugee. Ships arrived, looking at a display that showed Earth's transformation. The planet now hosted millions of refugees from across the galaxy, but it was more prosperous and peaceful than it had ever been. Humans and aliens worked together on projects that would have been impossible for either to achieve alone. The first ships from the core worlds have been detected, the architect announced. They will arrive within the year. Sarah felt a chill. The silence? No, these are allies. Word has spread that Earth has become a refuge for survivors. More species are coming, bringing knowledge and resources to help build our defenses. Through the chamber's walls, Sarah could see construction beginning on humanity's first quantum shipyard. The vessels being built there would be faster and more powerful than anything that had ever existed, designed to carry the fight to the silence, before it could reach inhabited worlds. How many ships will we need? Sarah asked. Thousands. But Dr. Chun, we will have them? And when the silence finally arrives at our galaxy, it will find not scattered refugees hiding in fear, but a united alliance ready to fight for the future of all life. Sarah smiled as she watched human and alien engineers working together on the shipyard. A year ago, humanity had thought they were alone in the universe. Now they were about to become the leaders of a galactic alliance. The war against the silence would be the greatest challenge any species had ever faced. But for the first time in millions of years, those who valued life and freedom would fight. As one. Earth had become more than a refuge, it had become hope itself, burning bright in the darkness of space, showing the galaxy that even in the face of ultimate extinction, intelligent beings could choose cooperation over conflict, compassion, over fear. The real fight was just beginning, but humanity was no longer facing it alone.